Thank you very much for tuning in to today's Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder, and with me today is CHRISTOF ROCHEL of CHRISTOF ROCHEL and the Wine-Soaked Goliards. It's a good band name.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We met when we were playing a show together, organised by Tara back at the Nomad, when the Nomad was called the Nomad.
The good old days.
Me, you, and Lydia Liza.
Yes.
And at that stage, you were solo. So could you talk a little bit about the evolution of your work as a songwriter, and then the genesis of the last time I'll say it perhaps, Wine-Soaked Goliards?
Yes. I have been playing shows in the Twin Cities. I went to the Perpich Art High School.
Yeah.
And started playing shows then. So for the past 10 years, I've done like a show every quarter, at least. And I took like a year off and meditated really hard for a year and just put music down.
And actually, so not kind of, you're not saying colloquially meditated, you did lots of actual meditation?
Yes. Yeah.
And what role did, it seems like meditation and mindfulness are crucial lyrically, thematically. What is the relationship between that meditating that you were doing and your craft?
Yeah, a lot of the songs that are on the Age of Extinction album that Tara produced for me and that the band now plays, I wrote after getting really interested in meditation and Buddhism in general, and just doing that kind of work of awakening to my body and body sensations. And I was a very heady person, very intellectual, and a lot of conditioning around be smart.
Yeah.
Kind of tuning into the body was just a wow, there's a whole other way to do it.
There's an interesting combination of philosophy, like cerebral philosophy, and focus on mindfulness of regarding the body in the lyrics.
Yeah. I like to, those are my, I threw this out there earlier, I love to think of terms and think of things in terms of Hegelian movement, from the thesis and then the antithesis, the total opposite, and then bring them back together.
Yeah.
A synthesis that's unique.
So this Hegelian component, the dialectics you enjoy, but I gathered that you also enjoy Spinoza, because one of the songs is called Naturing.
Absolutely.
And that, it's not purely from Spinoza, that's a Latin phrase that others have used too, but I associate it mostly with Spinoza and the ethics. Yeah. Spinoza says, by nature, naturing, or natura naturans, is that pronounced right?
I think so.
Yeah, we must understand what is in itself and is conceived through itself, God insofar as he is considered as a free cause. So for Spinoza, God and nature are the same thing, which is substance, which is the one.
Yeah, this thing that's underneath here's a table, I have a visual sensation that bounces off of it, I get sensations of touch it, but I never really touch the table. I have sensations of it. I don't get the table.
The substance.
Yeah. And that's everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the fun idea. Einstein was asked, what's your religion? He said, my God is Spinoza's God.
Yeah.
That's so, exciting.
And Einstein and CHRISTOF and the table and everything are modes, parts of substance, parts of God.
Yeah.
And when nature is naturing, nature is being nature, doing nature, being God.
Yeah.
Actualizing.
Divining, expressing.
Yeah.
I love there's another philosopher around the same time as Spinoza is Leibniz.
Yeah.
Leibniz. The way a picture, it's hard to walk away from Leibniz with anything coherent for me, but one thing I walk away with is there's this whole of existence, this whole universe, the past and the future. Imagine it all as some four-dimensional contraption, and God or something. There's something that stands even outside of that, outside of time, and can see the whole thing, and so it's already natured. I always think of that when I think of this naturing. There's this element of being outside of time, and the whole thing is just doing its thing.
Because Spinoza, I think, has the distinction between naturing and nature natured. Is that right? Is that what the distinction is?
I don't remember. Yeah, it's been a while since I picked up the ethics. But nature, yeah, in nature naturing.
In your song, nature naturing.
Yeah.
What's going on in the song with that idea?
There are a couple sort of points that I see it kind of kaleidoscoping through looking at nature, looking at the world, enjoying trees, and also sexuality is kind of built in there on one level. And it always kind of circles back through this Spinozan idea of there's something divine in all of this. There's something divine in me, there's something divine in that, and there's something divine in the activity just between just being alive.
Yeah, in everything. There's something divine in everything.
Yeah. And so it kind of circles between these themes of sexuality and literal nature, trees and that sort of thing, and then our spiritual experience.
Trees are really important, like in the opening lyrics of the song. Through the fingering branches of naked trees, they believe they've laid hold of the sky, and my eyes think they've cut it. And then you have a reference to kaleidoscoping the infinite blue. I know it ain't true. So it struck me as really interesting that we have these trees that believe they're touching the sky, and we have our eyes that think, so believing, thinking that they've cut it. Reminds me of what you were saying about the table. And then, so the trees believe, the eyes think, but I, whatever I am, know that that isn't true. What's the song saying about cognition and different ways of, different modes of cognition? Believing incorrectly something, the tree does. The eyes think something that is also incorrect, but I, whatever I am, know something.
Yeah, the eyes give us this, right, if we look up through trees, that I came up with this line. I was walking down Milwaukee Avenue.
Yeah.
The trees didn't have any leaves on them. And, you know, when we look at the tree or the sky through the trees, it looks like it's cut up into little pieces. That's kind of, if we never moved through the world, if we only got a visual field, we'd have that kind of sensation. Trees look like they're reaching up to it. And I think, obviously, when we look at trees, we move, we're like, oh, obviously the sky is a thing apart from it. But on a deeper level, it's not, even our thinking apparatus, our sort of eyes and our mind are going to conceive of the sky and the tree, but there's a consciousness that gets at that kind of Spinoza thing of it all being connected, it all being one on a deeper level. And I think of mind on one level, body on the same level, and then consciousness is a bit higher.
Okay.
Because we can watch the mind do its thing. We can sort
through
of watch
mindfulness.
ourselves think.
Yeah. Okay. Let's bring The Void into conversation with Nature Naturing. So these are two songs of yours. And it struck me that The Void also has references to eyes and the sky and I think trees. There's no walls in between them at one moment, and the them could apply to the eyes and the sky, or to the air and the lungs in the previous lyrics just before then. They are one. So again, this idea of like unity, they're all parts of substance, perhaps.
Yeah. That Parmenidean thing going way back to the Greeks, right? That's all.
I love how philosophical.
Me too. It's all, Parmenides said it's all one. Heraclitus was kind of, it's all many, it's all always changing. I like to think of them as being the same thing. You know, it's all one.
Hegel in dialectics again.
The
focus on unity, the focus on plurality, and then there's this
way of those coexisting.
But I think Spinoza is generally the reason why, so Marx, let's bring Marx in.
Always,
when, according to Althusser, like when Marx shifts from being the young Hegelian Marx to being the Marxist Marx, it can be seen as a shift away from Hegel to Spinoza, and a shift away from this dialectical way of thinking to focusing on Yeah, the idea of substance, I think, is used by Althusser just in a footnote to say, well, this is, like, Marx gets associated with Feuerbach, who he defines himself in opposition to eventually, and Hegel, but the philosopher that's a closer fit and enables us to understand the mature Marx is Spinoza, because Spinoza is not dialectical. Do you think Spinoza is not dialectical? I'm not sure how many people are interested in
Spinoza,
this question, but I am.
It's interesting. When I think of Hegel and I think of dialectics, I also think of the whole kind of arc of the history of philosophy,
Yeah.
which is something he applied that to sort of dialectical approach to understanding.
Yeah.
Spinoza's something of an aberration in there, in my mind. So he stands apart from certainly the Hegelian historical dialectic of philosophy, and then is his philosophy in and of itself. It's naturalistic in the sense that it sees the divine in nature. And maybe, hearing you mention Marx, right, Marx is seen as one of, like the existentialist, someone who wanted to chop the spiritual off and say, let's look at concrete things, the world itself. Yeah. And I guess you could see Spinoza, I see what you're saying, Spinoza's
Dialectical materialism.
Yeah.
And there's a materialism, of course, Spinoza's like an odd materialist.
Yes. Naturalist materialist.
Yeah, exactly. He's all about the divine.
But being present in the concrete.
Yeah. So for Hegel, you know, the whole thesis, antithesis, synthesis thing is obviously built on an assumption about how spirit actualizes itself, the manifestation of spirit through history, and we can apply this to the history of philosophy. We can look at any process and see this dialectical process, according to Hegel.
Yeah, that Geist, spirit, mind,
yeah.
both.
Yeah, and then, so what's the difference between that and the process of naturing itself? And do you seem to like both of them? Both of these ideas have been coming up in the songs and in our conversation so far. Yeah. The Hegelian dialectic and then the quite different, potentially, Spinozan process of naturing. What's the difference? Are they both important for your mindset?
I get the love of the Hegelian dialectic from Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, who I think were breathing the air of Hegel when they were writing and thinking.
Right.
And there's definitely in
reacting
Kierkegaard
against it to some extent. It was Nietzsche in particular.
Yeah. And Kierkegaard also said Hegel's, I want nothing to do with Hegel, but he had a sort of three-part approach in the way he thought about the progression of the individual through time. Absolutely.
And so yes, that's right.
Yeah, I just see it as like a practical way to look at how people live in the world. We kind of live dialectically. We do. Aristotle said in the Ethics, there's a golden mean that we strive for, and we recognize we're on one side, we go way too far to the other, and then we start zeroing in on that golden mean.
Yeah.
I think.
Do you have any songs that are effectively about this process of zeroing in on the golden mean? In naturing, that kind of moving between different themes. Yeah. And the Void, does that a little bit. It talks about some concrete things, and then it gets a little more abstract, and some concrete things a little more abstract. Yeah. I think just the form of the music and the lyrics does this little movement. As my own mind tries to work out the theme of the music, I write from one side to the other. Yeah. How did you hit upon this theme of the void? The void is something that we're all afraid of. So in the chorus, you can find it still as long as you are willing to turn away from screens and noise to see the void of which we're all afraid. Don't turn away from your screens right now. This is important. Something important is about to be revealed. I don't know about that. Which is, why are we afraid of the void? What is this void? I mentioned a little bit Nietzsche's The Void, especially there's the last verse. The line is, leader, genius, him or her, these are only names. Yeah. Dead things we drape around what's new to make us less afraid. Mm-hmm. There's Nietzsche in an essay called On Truth and Lies in an Extra Moral Sense. Mm-hmm. He talks about this, what he calls a poetic way of
being in the world or speaking and understanding the world that breaks away from our old way of understanding things and even our old way of talking, the old language, which you said, language is a mess of dead metaphors and dead metonyms.
Which gets a reference, a shout out in the song. I like the mental novocaine too. Cheap and chic and beautiful, a mental novocaine to numb our sense of what the world is like outside our
cage of dead and dying metaphors. From out the mouths of babes, the innocent foundations of nations built by slaves.
Yeah.
And that last one's sort of a bringing it back from the abstract to the concrete. So
yeah.
Think about all the ways that we hide and build a certain... We not only build up a set of metaphors and agreed upon meanings that kind of shield us from the uniqueness of, right, this is a cup, we all know what a cup is, but if you actually, this is a bizarre little thing that humans made out of glass to hold, and there it is. This is something alien. Sartre talks about it in Nausea. There's just something alien about pretty much everything once you start thinking about it, or if you say a word over and again, fork, 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 fork. Why does that mean fork? It's just and k.
Yeah.
That weird thing, digging into that weirdness and recognizing it often is poetry. That's what Nietzsche's talking about. It's like, that's creativity.
The process of making meaning, and so there's something which connects us to this cup and makes and kind of grounds us in this fiction making, but there's also something alienating about it. It's like once we have the term cup, like this and this are not the same, so and they're more similar than many other cups, but having the general term cup can kind of distance us from what's happening now with this particular interaction.
This individual thing, it starts to lose its individuality when we put it in that box.
Yeah.
Worse and worse with people, right?
Absolutely.
Put people in boxes.
Which is what the focus of the void is then. So how does that focus on language and truth and lies in an extramoral sense? Yeah. How does that relate to the void?
The song The Void, right, the chorus which you talked about is directly talking about this. There's something we're all afraid of that I don't want to get at, and I think one expression of that is just the richness and alienness and newness of all of this. And then the early verses of it are all about, they're all like diary entries. This is one of my diary songs. This is from my life.
Yeah.
Hard feelings I've had about my childhood, hard reflections on relationships I've gone through, dark thoughts and feelings I've had.
2 thoughts every day, in particular since you were 12 years old, pleasure and shame.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the significance of that?
Well, I was raised in a Catholic household, so the pleasure and shame, I like that. It's funny, I've gone to a few counselors in my time, recommend it, it's healthy.
Yes, quite.
Every counselor I've gone to after a few weeks, they asked me without me sort of volunteering, were you raised Catholic? So it's on me. Like there are people who recognize that there's something about that. But yeah, that lyric, pleasure and shame, since I was 12 years old, I think back, maybe with rose-tinted glasses on my youth. It was so simple and happy, but there's some point of around puberty when I started just feeling really depressed and ashamed. I think it has to do with that not relating to the body and not... and that's what I think the void is getting at, is we use language and labels and ways of understanding the world that were given from our parents and our culture and our churches. That's what we put ourselves in, we shape ourselves in, and then if something doesn't fit into that box, we cut it off or push it away or hide
Deny it. Yeah.
So this song is about delving into those things that we put away before and relating to them again.
Yeah, overcoming this fear of the void. What's the genesis of the fear of which we're all afraid?
Yeah.
Do we just happen to all be afraid of this, or is it like existentially? Like I suppose we have a lot invested in not exploring the void.
It's existential angst as Heidegger and Sartre and Camus understand it. It's when you start to feel into how language is arbitrary, And arbitrary isn't a bad thing, or like saying languages, somebody has to arbitrate, like this sound means this, and we have to agree on that, otherwise language isn't a useful tool.
Yeah.
So it's arbitrary in that way. When you dig into that, you can start to feel some despair and ennui, just at the sort of, oh, everything's turned upside down, things aren't quite the way I understand. And especially if you dig into that sort of historically and look at, oh, well, the ways that we've arbitrated our culture and language help some of us, white men, and hurt everybody else.
Yes.
That's especially, and all the French existentialists were, right, privileged European men to some extent. So I think angst and the void and the problem that existentialism feels and that the void is feeling has a lot to do with our history since 1500 globally of doing shameful things. We're just the world that we live in today is born out of a lot of pain and cruelty to ourselves and to others.
Yeah. I think that that's a major focus, specifically in the title track, The Age of Extinction.
Yeah.
Where and two lyrics that really jump out at me in relation to what you were just saying. For generation to come, what will our efforts here mean? Preparing the nightmare while living the dream. And then the other lyric, if you're killing the future and killing the past, what dies first? So if what we're doing in the present when we're not fully living in the present is killing the future and killing the past, what dies first? Could you talk a bit more about, use that as a starting point, to talk a bit more about what the age of extinction is so we're kind of segging to that through what you were saying a moment ago about the destructiveness.
Yeah. Age of Extinction, sort of, each of the verses, one of the verses does talk about the past. How do we relate to the past? We dig up the bones of dinosaurs and then burn them and put all this pollution from it into the air.
Yeah.
How do we relate to the future? Well, we are doing this and other things. We're creating a bigger and bigger sort of wealth, uneven wealth distribution. And we're not also killing the past in the sense of kind of cutting off from it. To get back to that void idea of choosing how we box things in. What was that? I really like the first thing you pointed out. For generations
to come, what will our efforts here mean?
I think about that a lot. We're living creating the nightmare while living the dream. Because we have it really good right now.
Yes.
In terms of luxury and just quality of life. And it seems like water is going to become more and more scarce, and tides are going to come in, and people are going to start getting angrier at each other and fighting each other more.
Absolutely. So it's an interesting moment where consciousness that is what we are creating is increasing.
Yeah.
And yet
it's still going on. In the
the destructive living of the dream, yeah.
I had a physics professor who talked about the oil crisis in the 1970s in the US, and it wasn't until sort of we were paying a lot for oil and people had to, wait around a whole block to get their gas out of the machine because everyone was so desperate for it. It was only then that people started seriously thinking about green technology, and that professor's takeaway was, we have no hope of doing anything about this climate change problem until something like that is happening to middle class people.
Wow, yes. Even when it's destructive still, all of naturing is divine for Spinoza. And in the chorus of naturing, nature will nature, birds will sing, people will try to control. That's just naturing. Even the lack of acknowledgement of the void, even the myopia and the this self-destructive activity is still part of the divine process of naturing in this extra moral sense.
And holding that perspective is the mindfulness, the Brahma Viharas, to be able to hold that pain and really constantly see and be relating with the despair and the gladness and the joy of others and all of it with equanimity.
With
That's-
equanimity, yes. So do you think that there is essentially a sadness to the record? I mean, which the title of which, The Age of Extinction, definitely kind of points in that direction. Or do you think there's more of a dialectical thing with like joy and sorrow going on?
There's definitely joy and sorrow going on, and like I said earlier, of the groups that we're looking forward to in this month's showcase.
This month's showcase.
There's some heartbreak is given to you in a candy-coated kind of way, and sometimes in sort of a jarringly and almost sardonically or sarcastically candy-coated. Age of Extinction has that going on, where it's kind of an upbeat piece, but it punches, And then there's a song called "Oh My Love and Lovely," which just sounds like a beautiful love song, but the more you key into the lyrics, it's very heartbreaking, and it's about tragedy. I like pairing two flavors, just putting them together.
The bittersweet.
That is the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how life is. Okay, we look within the song "The Age of Extinction." Near the end, there's a consideration of, okay, well, what can we do? Turn to the machines. But the construction of the machines has been like part of what got us here. Human ingenuity. That's exactly what got us into this mess.
Ingenuity starts building systems and societies, religions, explanations that let me have some cognitive dissonance. Say, I do feel this, but I have this idea, so it's okay.
Absolutely, yeah. And you were saying that you used to be more cerebral and more purely philosophical before, through mindfulness and exploring Buddhism, you kind of tapped into this other way of being. What is the record saying about the not mindfulness, but like the mind, the cerebral,
the cerebralness, intellectualness? There's some intellectual lyrics, and a lot of it pays off more if you've dug into philosophy. So I think in the record it's talking about it's saying more important than the philosophy, or the philosophy, or the cerebral philosophy at least, is pointing towards doing spiritual work. By spirit, I just mean, self-work. Thinking about this self and what makes me feel good emotionally, what makes me feel bad emotionally, starting to take account of that.
Becoming more mindful of that, like monitoring oneself. Is that right? Nietzsche talks about disciplining oneself to a whole. I really like that idea. Yeah. So like just becoming more conscious. You were saying consciousness is on a higher level than mind and body. Yeah.
And it's not there isn't like a mind-body competition.
Right.
That's an old Cartesian kind of thing when we have it held
Spinoza's
over.
is the first great critique of that Cartesian dualism.
Yes.
Good old Spinoza.
Spinoza, and then Nietzsche kept with it.
Yes.
Pulled the whole rug out from under it. I love, Descartes said, right, I think, therefore I am. Nietzsche said, we can't say I think, therefore I am. We can't even say I think. The most we can say is thinking is going on here. But I think intellectualism, it's okay to be intellectual. It's also okay to not, refine your intellect or become super bookish. The important thing is on the level of consciousness and heart, of just watch how you feel. Yeah, like in Buddhism, the idea of mind and heart are the same.